before they begin on their discussion, we're going to just go over what Oles for Justice in Palestine works towards and kind of introduce the ways that those of us who aren't going to be speaking, so Ariana, Rachel, and I, came into the organization. So as Lynn already read, our mission statement basically says that we are a diverse group who aim to come together and discuss the conflict from a very democratic perspective. We're aiming for justice rather than partisan, dogmatic pro-Palestinian support or dogmatic pro-Israeli support.
Okay. We do a lot of advocacy work on our campus. We give a lot of presentations, and we have in the past partnered with J Street, a Jewish organization at Carleton, to do kind of like a debate type presentation about just our different views on the conflict, as well as next semester we're in the midst of planning like a Palestinian awareness, both cultural events and political events, and if you want to ask more questions about the specific events that we do, please come and talk to us after.
So a great thing about St. Olaf College is that it's a pretty socially engaged place, and a lot of people come to the issue from very different perspectives, but everyone's interested in the idea of justice. So for me, I came into contact with the conflict through my girlfriend. I began dating Tala, who's now the president of Oles for Justice in Palestine, 2 years ago. And she sort of introduced me to the conflict, which I'd looked over for years. I think it's so simple, or it's been made to be so simple for an American to simply ignore the conflict. And I was as guilty of that as anybody else in the United States is, simply not knowing anything about it. But as she continued to talk to me and as our relationship progressed, I became very just fascinated by the fact that nobody knows about this conflict, or so few people do, and that the injustice is as great as it is in the 21st century is simply shocking to me. So last year I went on an interim trip with the religion department led by one of our great New Testament scholars to Palestine, Israel, Jordan, and the Golan Heights. So I say Syria. Some people might quibble about that, but it's Syria. Anyway, Ariana and Rachel also went with me. And this is actually a photo we took after we spray painted the wall in Bethlehem. So that's the whole class. And the great thing about St. Olaf is that these people come into contact with the conflict in all sorts of different ways. We have courses taught by Arab American scholars about the sociology of the conflict and the Middle East in general. There's one about Arab American film and literature, which you're in right now, Ariana. So everyone approaches it from different perspectives. This was probably the most direct contact that most of the students had a chance to have with the conflict, and we were fortunate enough to go on and be part of that. So when I went on that, I kind of converted Ariana and Rachel, or drew them into the organization. And everyone else has maintained pretty active relations with the organization. I don't think there's anybody from our trip that isn't a supporter of OJP, even if they're not a particularly active one. So go ahead and describe what you get.
Yeah, so I was really interested in going on this trip specifically because I was raised Jewish, and I come from a small town in central Illinois, so there's not a lot of Jews there, and they're pretty conservative in their views. So I was taught from a very young age about how these evil Arabs were trying to take over our nation, and so being the weird nerdy person that I was growing up, I decided to look into it a lot, and I was like, what the heck? This is not what's happening. Why is this what I was being taught? And so I had this big struggle with my faith, and then I was like, I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to go to Palestine and to Israel and see these things for myself. And so I was faced with the decision of going on Birthright. Is everyone familiar with Birthright? It's not? Yeah. Which probably would have furthered the propaganda that I was being exposed to. Or I had a chance to go on this really amazing trip. And I chose to go on this trip because even though it was religiously focused, it's about tying religion and politics together and understanding the conflict from a variety of perspectives. So we heard from people of all different faiths. We heard from secular people, we heard from the PLO, but we also heard from like rabbis, and it was just a much more well-rounded experience that I am incredibly grateful for.
So my involvement definitely stemmed from traveling to Palestine and I think being able to truly witness what was going on. I grew up in New York and my hometown was split 50-50 about Christian and Jewish. And, you know, there's always the talk about Israel and the Jewish hope to go back to Israel. And I didn't know a lot about the conflict, and I was one of those people who grew up hearing about it, but it wasn't front and center in my life. And so my true exposure came when we traveled to Israel and Palestine, and we learned about the conflict and we learned about the oppression, and in some ways tied religion into our Christian religion into how we can look at the conflict. But a particular event that really moved me is we traveled and we toured the town of Lifta, which was a Palestinian village, and the man who took us through Lifta was a child in 1948 when they were forced to leave, and he went through his home and he's like, I can remember where my mother made me bread, and I can remember where I played with my friends and where we gardened and how this was our land. And he also told the story of how he was forced to leave out of fear of massacre, and how they didn't take their keys, they just brought the bare minimum of clothes because they thought they would be coming home. And since 1948, they haven't ever come home. And yet he still sees Lifta as his home, and he actively tries to keep it from being demolished and made into a road so that trade routes work. And when we were there in particular, he was talking about how right now Lifta is a state park, and so it should be preserved and there should be no harm done to any of the trees there, any of the land. And as he was saying that, we rounded a corner and all these trees had been demolished and cut down, and he was like, that was the moment where he kind of broke down of his home being ruined and taken from him, and even through his activism and trying to have a voice, still continually being oppressed. And so that was that moment where I was like, I really want to do something. I want to figure out how to have a voice. And at St. Olaf, that came through joining OJP.
So, you've heard about our recent experiences and what drew us to the conflict just over the last 2 years, I would say. That's a lot different than your relationship with the conflict if you grew up in the conflict. So I'm going to introduce Saeed and Laura, who are both Palestinians, and they're going to talk about growing up in the conflict and what it's like to live in a war zone, essentially, or a prison in Gaza's case, for your entire life, and especially how it feels to be a child growing up there. So, here we go.
Hello. So I'm Saeed, and this is Laura. We wanted to show this picture first, to show how diverse Palestine actually is. Because when people think of Palestine, most people think of it as a Muslim country who's like mostly Arab people live in it. But Palestine is really diverse. It has Muslims, Christians, and some Jews, like Arab Jews, live in it. And people come from like different backgrounds. They have different identities, different things that they identify with. So for me,
this picture is Jerusalem. I hope you all know, and it's a really beautiful picture. It shows one part of Palestine, which is a really beautiful part.
So this map shows how Palestine as a country has been disappearing, I guess, as the title says. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Palestinian-Israeli history and conflict. So I come from the Gaza Strip, which is the little tiny piece by the Mediterranean to the left, to the west side, and Laura comes from the West Bank, which is to the west side of the Jordan River.
And it shows, the map shows like from the start before 1948, which is the first like the Nakba where it all started. And the last one is 2012, and this is not obviously the most recent one. So I have a picture of the West Bank right now, and you can see like this shape is what is meant to be for like the Palestinian land, but it's actually not. So the orange parts are what we own now, and that doesn't mean that we live there free because we own it, because it's all under.
The thing to clarify as well is when Israel came to take over the land, let me say, as a Palestinian, they had this idea of separating Palestine, and if you think from an Israeli perspective or point of view, it's completely convenient to split Palestinians. I'm from Gaza Strip. Laura's from the West Bank, and we're completely separated. We don't know. I've never been to the West Bank my whole life.
And I've never been to Gaza.
Yeah, and we are from the same country. I have an uncle who lives in the West Bank, and I've never seen him. I've never met my cousins before. I've never had a chance to go to Jerusalem, which is the capital of my country. It's like not being able to go to Washington, D.C. So Gaza Strip is, I would say it's an open present. It's a little strip of land that has no way of like getting out of it. We have almost 2 million people, and it's a slightly more twice the size of Washington, D.C. And we have been under siege since 2009. And you might wonder how I got out and how I'm here today, but I was lucky enough to spend an exchange year in 2012, 2013 in Vermont with the Youth Exchange and Study Program that was funded by the Department of State. And after that, I went back to Gaza. And yeah, another note, when I was a witness of the 2008-2009 operation on Gaza, the first one. And I was in Vermont, and during my exchange program, that's when the 2012-2013 operation happened. And then I was back home for my senior year of high school, 2014, and that's when the third operation happened, summer of 2014, unfortunately. And after that, I found my way out again to spend another gap year in Istanbul, Turkey. And then I found my way here back to St Olaf, right in the middle of Minnesota. And I'm really grateful to be here because a lot of people are nice about it, and they know a lot. They know a lot about the conflict, and they know where to stand in terms of that. I don't know what else I want to say. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the plan?
Okay. This is just like an overview of where we're coming from. Later on, we're going to be speaking about our personal experiences. So Tala was supposed to be here, so we're going to be like taking over her segment a little bit. And she comes from Bethlehem, which is where Jesus was born. And Bethlehem is really similar to Ramallah, where my city, but they're also very different. So Bethlehem is known to be surrounded by the wall all over, so it's like different surrounded by the wall, which is not something normal to live in, you know, it's not a normal situation.
And also another note would be the West Bank is flooded with soldiers and settlements, but Gaza is completely under blockade right now since 2009. So I haven't seen any Israeli soldiers or anything because there's no way of coming in or going out of Gaza. But in the West Bank, it's completely different. They have settlements, they have gangs all over, checkpoints all over, in between Bethlehem and Ramallah, different cities. Just wanted to clarify that.
So talking also about Ramallah, this is my city, and it's around 57,000 people living there. So Ramallah is known as the cosmopolitan city, but that doesn't mean it's empty from all those settlements or soldier attacks or everything. I've read a really interesting article like this week about how people run away from the awful reality by like nightlife and going out, because it's very hard to go out of the West Bank without a permit, and West Bank is pretty much Bethlehem, Jericho, Ramallah, like the cities are pretty much the same, and we don't have a sea, we don't have access to the Dead Sea, which is right next to us, but we can't go. So also the apartheid wall, which is the wall that separates Palestine and Israel, is a form of expression. This wall is the one that separates Ramallah and Jerusalem, and this is just one segment of it, but it's full of people expressing their feelings through art, which is really beautiful. And this is the one that OJP members visited. So I'm talking a little bit about the settlements. As you can see, Ramallah and Psagot, they're very, very close. The second picture on the right shows a picture from my school. So you can see the settlement like from my classroom. It's really, really close, so it's a bit dangerous to be.
Really, like, it's impossible for Palestinians to walk in colonies or settlements, but if it's the opposite way around, if you're an Israeli Jew and you just want to walk in the Palestinian land, it's like you're right, you can do so. But
it's still dangerous for them.
It's dangerous for them, but if it's the other way around, you would probably get shot if you walk in a settlement, like an Israeli settlement.
And this is another settlement. It's the largest one out of the 4 big ones in Palestine, and it has 40,000 settlers, which is a very large number for one settlement. And it shows, like, from a plane view how big it is, and the one on the right, upper right, shows how this is part of it. So all of the settlement, it looks like that, and it's around almost 19 square miles. It's like 86.4% of it is private Palestinian land that is occupied by the settlers.
And you can see like how a small segment of land is separated into Palestinian and Israeli settlements, but most of the time the Israeli settlements have most of the resources like water and like clean water or like roads, and like in Palestine we don't get like a lot of Palestinian side, we don't get a lot of like clean water, just all the clean water goes to the Israeli settlements, and we don't have a lot of funding to reconstruct whatever has been damaged by the constant attacks.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about our lives there. I'm going to start a little bit to talk about, so it's a misconception that Christians and Muslims do not live together in peace, although it's like we're struggling the same struggle, we have the same enemy, we're the same. So these are like 2 pictures from Ramallah. The one on the right is obviously Christmas, and this is a big tree. It's very big in the middle of the city center, and it's decorated by like Muslims and Christians. It's like a really nice Christmas event. The same place, city center, and it's a kid that he is surrounded by balloons, and this is the Muslim holiday. So in the city center, all around the city, it's Muslims and Christians celebrating their own holidays and celebrating each other's holidays together. We also, I didn't include pictures, but there's Easter, there's the other Eid al-Fitr for the Muslims, so it's like a community together. Saeed is now going to talk a little bit about living in Gaza, and then we'll just go like talking about how we struggled through the invasions, war, everything that was kind of unpleasant.
Yeah, I'm just gonna speak of like what's on my mind right now, or what comes to my mind while I'm talking. Growing up in Gaza, it was really, really different for me as a Palestinian. Maybe it would be different from Laura or another Palestinian growing up in Gaza Strip. I had 2 conflicts. I had my sexuality conflict that was in conflict with what was the norm, because when you're from an Arab country, let me say Muslim country as well, it's really hard to be out of what's seen to be the right lifestyle in Gaza. So I was a Palestinian who didn't have a lot of opportunities, and I also identified with another thing that was in conflict. So I was looking for ways of going out. I was a witness of 2 different operations, and it was like really hard growing up in Gaza, because I was just like I did not know what was happening. Like, I came out into a world that was endangered and that did not allow me to be myself, and I was just looking for ways to get out of there. And after I got out, I just couldn't forget about being from Palestine, although I was not being able to be myself at home. So getting out here and coming to the States, although I was like still young, I was a high school student, I couldn't but advocate and talk about my experiences back home. I was talking about the oppression, and I was talking about not feeling like a human being, basically. And it was really hard for me to get out from Gaza because the borders are usually closed. We have two borders, one of them that allows access to Israel and the West Bank. It's really hard to get through that border. It's called the Erez border, and like you need a miracle basically to get out of there and cross to the other side, supposedly the other side of your country, the West Bank, and then go to Jordan so you can use the airports. As many of you might know, we don't have any borders, any airports or seaports in Gaza Strip, so it's really hard to basically travel. And then you have Egypt on the other side, and one border that has access to Egypt, and that's usually closed as well most of the time. And this is also another misconception. People think that Palestine has full Arab support, and that's not usually the case. We don't get a lot of support from most of the Arab countries. Most of the European countries might actually care more about Palestine. So Egypt has not been doing well in terms of giving support to Palestinians. For example, from my personal experiences, it took me 3 months in order to get out through the Egyptian border, to go to Cairo, and then fly from there. Because it's just like closed most of the time, and you need to register and wait for your turn to get out. So it's really hard. Like, we don't have basic human rights. And during the operations, especially the first one, it had the most effect on me because we were locked down for almost 40 days. I was locked in my house with my family. We did not have enough resources or food or clean water or gas for any, and it was winter and it was really cold, and we had to sleep in the most secure room in the house because everything was shaking, everything was dark. I think of it as if it was yesterday, like literally yesterday. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. I wake up like shaking from my sleep because I just think of like the times that I woke up from my sleep because I heard a sudden explosion right in front of my door. And these type of things, I'm still traumatized from all of the operations that I witnessed. If I hear a sudden noise, I freak out all of a sudden because I don't know if it's just like it's not me only, it's everyone back home. We're all traumatized from everything that has been happening. I don't know what else. Laura can speak about her experience right now.
Okay. I had a similar yet different experience. So Ramallah is not under siege, but one of my, I'm gonna speak of my memories of the things that has happened. So 2000 was the second intifada and I was 4. I have some memories, but they're all not clear. The 2002 invasion, which it was a 40-day curfew, that, I remember it in every single, in all its details, yeah. I forget English sometimes.
It's really hard when you're under pressure to speak.
The first night there was a bombing around 10 minutes away from my house. So we were sleeping, it was summer, so no school, and it was everyone was sleeping. And then I just wake up, my dad was carrying me down the stairs, my mom was carrying my little brother, and I just didn't know what was happening. I can hear stuff falling, I can see fireworks, which I thought were fireworks, but they weren't actually fireworks. And we were going to the basement, and I was just I've never seen my mom cry, but she was crying because she was scared. And I didn't know how to feel. Like, my dad was fine, he was holding on, but she was crying, and I didn't know what to feel because how would somebody feel when there's bombing outside, but you don't know, like, what's happening? So that night went fine in the end, but then the next morning we woke up and everything was closed, and then the soldiers would go like in their tanks announcing that it's a curfew. A curfew means you do not leave to get any groceries or like anything you need. So as time passed, like days, the supermarkets started opening like small doors, and we would like run to the closest place to get some groceries because eventually we'd run out of like the things we wanted to eat. Of course, there was no electricity, so everything in the fridge was gone or eaten because there's nothing. So that was like one of my memories about dealing with a curfew. My city wasn't being under attack, it was just curfew, but we can see like at night we can see like fireworks, but they were bombs falling on Gaza. I would feel bad that it's falling on Gaza, but there was nothing we can do about it, which hurts a lot because I don't know, I felt scared that we were under curfew, but it wasn't anything compared to what they were feeling under attack. I'm sure Saeed has some other memories, like personal memories.
Yeah, for me, it's coming here to the U.S. from Gaza Strip was really weird. I was really scared and nervous of coming here because I knew that I would meet a lot of Israelis for the first time. But then when I first met the first Israeli person that I've met, it was in my high school in Vermont, and I was really scared of meeting him. And I was like, hey, I'm from Palestine, I'm from Gaza Strip. And then he was like saying, like he gave me a hug and he's like I'm really glad that you're here, like you're the first original Palestinian that I ever meet. And I'm like, whoa, like I thought you were like attacking me or something. So it was like pretty cool. And the same thing happened at St Olaf. There is another Israeli international student. Her name is Tuam. She's a great person. When I first met her, I hit my name tag. It had my name and where I'm from on that, so I hit it. And I was like, oh, like you're from Israel. Where are you from in Israel? She's like, I'm from right next to the Gaza border. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, so we're neighbors. And then I showed my name tag. I'm like, I'm from Gaza Strip. And then she gave me a hug too. I'm like, yeah, like we can talk about things. We can talk about the conflict now. So that was pretty cool. But one thing that kind of like makes me mad is how a lot of people refer to the conflict as like equal. Whenever there's an operation or attack in Gaza, people refer to it as a war. And I'm like, there's no equal power, so you can't call it a war. You may call it a genocide when you see Israel killing thousands and thousands of Palestinians, and the casualties on the Israeli side is like 10. I understand that there is a significance, but you can't call it an equal war. That just came to my mind right now. And also, God, I forgot what I was saying. I was going to say something important. Okay, maybe we can go to work a little bit. Just say something, I don't know. I was about to say something. Just say anything, talk about your...
Okay, well before we finish, we're not finishing now, but we wanted to like make it clear that if you have questions, we're going to be taking a lot of questions with our OGP members too. So if you have anything, just keep it in mind and ask us about it, because we really like to answer questions, because we know that you might have some stuff you would like to know that we might haven't shared. So.
We will pass one of these microphones around.
Casualties. If you could describe from your personal experiences what it was like for life to come back. How do people come back from that?
I'm gonna first correct you, I'm sorry. It's an operation or attack.
I'm sorry.
I hate relating it to, I hate referring to it as war, as I said earlier. But I think Gaza is really, really hard. I'm not sure if you all noticed the bullet points that I had earlier. It said that the unemployment rate was, I think, up to 70%. A lot of people graduate. We have a couple of universities. Most of their faculties were bombed earlier or before. It says here almost 30, about 40%, but it's actually more than that. I don't know how to like explain like life in Gaza. It's like we don't have anything. Like we have Gaza City, which is where I'm from, up north, that little heart, and then it might look big, but Gaza Strip is really, really small. Like.
It's a strip.
Like, it's so small. You can go from the north up to the south in like a 15-minute ride. And I think it's like a 5-minute ride from the east to the west. It's like really, really tiny. And we have 2 million people, so it's highly, highly populated. Like, it's so crowded. And we don't, one thing that I did, power cuts I mentioned here, it's an everyday issue in Gaza. Like, we have electricity, right now I think it's 8 hours every 12 hours. And that's when we get power. And then we have the private generators, and then when there's no gas, you can't get it, you can't like turn them on. Now winter is coming and it's gonna get colder and no heaters, and that's another problem, and then getting blankets going. It's a lot of work. And luckily enough, my family lives in a building, in an apartment, and they can like be secured like in a house where you can like keep it warm. But like for other people whose houses were bombed in the operations, they don't have shelter. They don't have any way of like keeping their children warm. And we will hear a lot of stories about children dying from cold in winter, and most of these stories don't make it to the news because it's just like an every year thing. It happens every year, and just people. I mean, people want to hear about it, but the media is not doing a great job of like delivering these stories. And then Gaza starts asking for more international aid, and then Israel tries to kind of block it, and it never makes it. It never makes it like finds its way to Gaza.
Question here.
Now, another question about Gaza, about the rebuilding from the 2008-9 and 2014. I was reading that countries came together pretty quickly after the 2014, if I remember correctly, and pledged some billions of dollars, but a very, very small percentage of that has been forthcoming. And so you might not know about those figures, but do you know what's happening in terms of the rebuilding? Are materials getting in? Anything happening?
The thing is, we hear about these billions of dollars, but we do not see anything coming in Gaza. There's a lot of restrictions on these reconstruction materials coming in Gaza. Israel has a lot of restrictions, so we don't see these the materials that we need to reconstruct. We have the money. I don't know what the money is going for. The Palestinian Authority is paying. We don't have an economy, so the Palestinian Authority. I'm being honest. Palestine does not have an economy at all. So the Palestinian Authority needs to rely on the aid of the international aid, so they can pay the wages for the employees that they have. Actually, the note that I was thinking of earlier just came to my mind now. A lot of people criticize Hamas for its existence, I guess, and a lot of people refer to it as a terrorist party. But this is my very personal opinion. There's a lot of things that Hamas needs to be blamed for, but at the same time, Palestine needs some sort of resistance, because when you have an oppressor and you're not doing anything, you're going to keep being oppressed. So having this sort of resisting party that is kind of seen as like a terrorist party by like international community, but we actually are in need, and talking about the like so-called war most of how we respond to the attacks is usually like insignificant. Like the bombs and the rockets that are talked about in the news constantly, they are handmade, and when they usually shoot them, they don't have a target. Like they just shoot them and then like hope that they would fall somewhere, and the damage that these rockets cause is nothing. It's like a hole in the ground. And Israel have like planes that they can like bring down an entire tower that has like 500 families living in it. That's what happened during the summer of 2014. I think 5 residence towers were brought down to the ground, and a lot of families are displaced right now because of that. And none of these buildings were reconstructed yet.
I have a question about Israeli settlements in the West Bank, maybe for Laura. I visited a settlement in 2008, and it's clear to me that they're there, they're not leaving. They've invested millions of dollars in beautiful homes and parks and schools and synagogues. So I guess my question is, how Palestinian people that own the land find out that they've just been displaced? And then when people are displaced, do many of them leave the West Bank, or do they just move in with friends, relatives, other people? Because I guess really the objective of settlements is to displace all Palestinians from the West Bank.
As you said, the settlements are like home for them. So the people who were displaced either in 1948 in the first Nakba. So when they were displaced, they were displaced around Palestine or neighboring countries like Lebanon or Jordan or anywhere else. So when these displaced families come back, of course you've all heard about the right of return. They told them you're gonna leave and then you're gonna come back. That's why they held on to their keys and everything. So they come back and there's this wall and a home or a new house right where their home was. So I don't know how would that feel for them, but imagine going to your house and you find a new house with new people and children playing, and I mean it must be heartbreaking. So they can't really do anything about it because in the first place they shouldn't be there right now because it's not their land anymore, it's occupied. And as I said, it's occupied private Palestinian land. So if I own this land and I have papers, they're just gonna tear the papers and they're gonna say, well, you don't own it anymore because I'm already here. And the problem is, it's been in May it's gonna be 68 years, and next May it's gonna be 69 years, and then 70 years, and since they couldn't do anything about it from the first, second, third year, and so on, what are they gonna do about it after 70 years of the settlements existing? So we were actually talking about that yesterday, Said and I, about the people who were living before 1948 are gonna might not be here for the next 10 years, and then their children will know that, oh, my parents had this house there, but they don't have any ownership for it right now. So it's the ownership is vanishing year by year. So as the months pass, it's going away. So there is no ownership for Palestinians for the settlements that they're taking over now.
And also, in general, these settlers just walk in with the tanks and they demolish the house and they take over. And then if you're there, you're gonna die. So you don't have an option except to run away and go somewhere else, live with your neighbors or something. That's what the case is in the West Bank most of the time when it comes to settlements. And it's really, really bad.
So just on another note concerning the map, so this whole segment was Palestinian, and by when they did the Oslo and everything, and then years passing, they just start integrating themselves into Palestinian land. So they would just occupy this house and then the house next to it, and then the whole neighborhood would be occupied, and then it would be called a settlement. So that's why the whole West Bank is segmented. There are settlements going through Palestinian lands, and then there is the wall built, and it's like diminishing. So it's like, by law, Palestinians have the rest, so like Israelis have 79% of the whole Palestine by law, but by reality, we barely have 1%, and it's diminishing by like day by
so
day.
quickly. And like, sorry.
I'm sorry, question back here?
Thank you all for your stories. It was really interesting to hear you. I'm wondering what Oles for Justice in Palestine is doing now. Do you have a divestment campaign? What's happening on campus?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so our biggest campaign right now is we're working with like the on-campus store to, I don't know if y'all are familiar, but Sabra Hummus, a lot of the proceeds from Sabra Hummus go towards the IDF, so we're working to not sell Sabra Hummus on our campus anymore. As well as, so a lot of people who St. Olaf is a pretty homogenous place, so we do a lot of education and outreach programs just to get those conversations going, because a lot of people are incredibly uneducated just due to lack of exposure about, or lack of exposure from both sides of the conflict. So we do a lot of education outreach.
As to the full divestment campaign, we're holding off on that for at least a couple of years, just to make sure that if we ever do choose to work towards a divestment, it'll be one strong, organized campaign rather than several failed elections, we think, or votes on it. It'd be much better to be completely prepared and go all in and let the whole school decide when they're all educated on it, and when it becomes an issue, just raise it once and hope. I hope we succeed.
Yeah, it's like a slowly but surely kind of. We're a really, really small organization. We just started a few years ago, so we're really kind of just getting our feet on the ground right now.
Yeah, like.
Well, I think I got the question. Do you want me to repeat?
Yeah.
Just like, do Palestinians see it, or at least from your experiences, do Palestinians? Do Palestinians view it as a war of conflict, with the end goal being the extinguishing the Palestinian people in the Holy Land?
I can't speak of all Palestinians. Like, I don't know what they think, because like I personally believe in the two-state solution, and I believe that we can coexist together and just like end the conflict where it is now. But from my point of view, Israel doesn't want that. They don't want the two-state solution, and they want to still take over and conquer more land in the West Bank, mainly, since Gaza is just like a small strip of land. So they've been doing a lot of work on going more of conflicts in the West Bank and selling more, taking over more land. And as Laura explained how these settlements work, they literally built a wall around these little tiny villages, and then they oppress them until these villagers don't have any option except to leave and go somewhere else, and then they take over the land or demolish the houses.
I think it's fair to make an analogy here, which is often made between the Palestinians and the Native Americans, because you see a lot of these similar things. And we've moved beyond a point where there'll be a little bighorn sort of a situation, a zero-sum game, so you can't call it an equal war in that sense. And I think that's what Saeed's point was. Essentially, every conflict that you see between the Palestinians and the Israelis is more of a Wounded Knee scenario than a little bighorn scenario.
Question here?
Well, I commend all of you for what you're doing, the obvious thoughtfulness part. Are you able to can you Skype with your families? How are they doing? And are you planning on heading back home when your education is done?
Well, yeah, my family is currently living in Ramallah, and I can't say that it's the same as Gaza, because it's safer, but it's still open to all those attacks and invasions. So my family, like throughout the years, they've been ready to deal with sudden attacks or something. I'm grateful that it hasn't happened for a few years. We've had some curfews, but it wasn't as bad as Gaza is now. So I am, of course, daily I'm worried about my parents. Not worried as we talk all the time, but we talk daily, and I'm more worried about the people who live in areas that are less safe. And I'm very fortunate that I live in a place where it's really safe, or my home where it is. It's not free from all the attacks and everything, but it's still safer than other households. I'm sure Saeed has a different household experience in Gaza.
Yeah, for me, I'm constantly worried because I'm always watching the news and on Facebook, reading my friends, whatever they're posting or talking about, because I hear a lot about, we hear a lot about planes and rockets being shot or something, and then we hear a lot about operations that might take action at some point, because we have been experiencing these every 2 years, like 2012, 2014, and then 2008 and 9 too. And people are scared all the time when they just hear about 5 planes in different regions, and they just start expecting something to happen. And when there's no power, I have no connection with my family, so it's kind of hard to ask what's going on in our neighborhood. Can you hear the planes? Are you expecting something to happen? So sometimes you don't know, you're just displaced, and you're just you don't know how to reach your family. You start reaching your neighbors. When I was doing my exchange program, that's when the 2012 operation happened, and I was at some point I wanted to pack my bags and just go back home, and even though it was under attack, I just wanted to be with my family because I didn't want to think about the idea of losing them and not being there, not even talking to them before that, and luckily, fortunately, it didn't. Nothing happened to them, and they were safe.
Okay, I think we will conclude. There's one more? Yes. One more. That's it.
Thank you very much for your talk. And I have a question. When you were doing your outreach and campaign in St. Olaf, did you meet any anti-Palestinian pro-Israeli resistance, and how did you confront those, if any?
Can't hear.
Sure. Yeah, in your outreach and campaign at St. Olaf campus, did you meet any anti-Palestinian pro-Israeli resistance, and how did you confront them, if you did?
So yeah, actually before I was a freshman here, it would have been the year that I was a senior in high school, there was a big pro-Palestinian campaign, and they were hanging Palestinian flags, and there were flyers across campus, and someone stole one of the flags in a pretty deliberate insult to the cause. And someone also wrote, probably, I would say much more blatantly offensively, "Death to Gaza," right on one of our posters. So there's some, it's gone down since we began, I think. I think we haven't ever encountered anything very immediate. There's some community members that will come whenever there's an event about Arabs or Palestine or anything of that nature, particularly Islamophobic people most of the time from the community who'll come in and try to make a scene. Typically the administration's pretty good in dealing with that type of thing, and as an organization it hasn't been a problem since our issue several years back, which I just talked about.
Yeah, so we recognize that our cause is not necessarily super supported on our campus. So yeah, since the vandalization that we dealt with, we have made an incredibly conscious effort to just be really aware of everything that we say, and then also working with other organizations to start conversations instead of starting debates that are going to polarize people. And that's really our focus, is to get people talking about it and get people forming their own opinions about the conflict and educating them when they ask questions, but not coming from a place where it's just going to antagonize people or polarize them further into their pro-Israeli leanings.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the focus of our group is going back to humanizing the conflict. We focus on humanizing the conflict again. I think the United States has done a really good job of making it hard to always see Palestinians as humans, and so we focus on raising that, like creating a dialogue where individuals who come and listen have to recognize once again that these are people and these are their lives, and so I think that's how we counteract a lot of these actions of hate, and that, you know, we try to create a dialogue in which you recognize these are human beings that you're attacking, or this is why we have our mission.
And I would add that having such excellent Palestinian students on campus goes a long ways in that respect.
I was just going to ask you to thank these courageous young people that you just did. I also want to add that there are many college campuses in the Twin City area, throughout Minnesota, Iowa, elsewhere, that are working in the same vein to raise the recognition of the issues among college campuses. So we thank all young people for their